Be live. This is Phil Illy, who just wrote, is soon releasing Auto-Heterosexual, being uh, attracted to being the other sex. And it is about autogynephilia and autoandrophilia. And I've got some questions, and we're gonna learn more about this because I find that autogynephilia is like the scapegoat for everybody, right? Would
Yeah,
you?
like in the political discourse.
Oh yeah, yes, yes.
Yeah, no, it's like yeah, we're just shit on, and my personal hypothesis as to why this is even possible that we're shit on to this degree is that, you know, um basically the trans movement has suppressed knowledge of this, and so the only people left to talk about it are like the TERFs and the conservatives, and so they're just able to say whatever they want, and there's no countervailing force against them that has like a sex positive angle or like even just being neutral about it. There's no one to do that.
Right. I saw you on another interview mention something like you have a inclination to say truths, and nothing's going to stop you from saying truths, and that's your mission.
It's autism, yeah.
Okay. That's one of my questions. That's one of my questions, but let me get to that. Okay.
Yeah. I mean, I joke about being autism, but obviously not everyone that has the tism is like beholden, like just stuck saying true things. But I've noticed that people with that neurotype do tend to care if something is real more than whether if something's popular.
Okay, so what do you mean when you say suppressed knowledge? Wait, actually, first,
Um,
before I get to that, let's
yeah.
just off the top of the bat, just in case anybody doesn't know, what is autogynephilia or autoandrophilia? Just, for the
Um,
listeners.
Autogynephilia is attraction to being a woman. It's a sexual orientation. It's heterosexual, male heterosexuality, just pointing at yourself instead of others. And autoandrophilia is the female counterpart. It is the attraction to being a man, and it is yeah, both of those together, I think, are the most common cause of gender transition.
Okay. Do you think that they can have causes outside? Like, do you think it starts there, or do you think there could be causes that can make you develop autogynephilia or androphilia? Autoandrophilia.
Oh, like about like the etiology of like what causes these orientations or
Yeah.
predispositions. Um, I think that it's mostly a inborn predisposition that it's not something that people choose. It just happens in a subset of people, and it does seem to run in families a little bit, um, which makes me think genes contribute to that, and um, yeah, I've seen a lot of that's such a common question on the Ask AGP subreddit is like, why does this happen? And everyone has their own theory about what happened. And as is popular these days, people often say it's trauma. You know, that's like the explainer for everything. And um, I the trauma hypothesis, I don't think it's been tested. Um, but I don't really see why we need to put too much stock in that one because like when people are trying to explain heterosexuality, they don't say it's because of trauma. You know, when they try to explain
Sure.
homosexuality, people aren't saying, "Oh, it's trauma,"
Hmm.
So I think it's just yeah, it's just a sexual orientation, and it happens in some people and not in others, and it's mostly like an inborn predisposition.
As far as we can tell.
Right. Yeah, like you're autogynephilic, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
But I feel like, I mean, first, good question. How much of this do you want to be a conversation and how much do you want it to be an interview? Because I am prepared for both, but
Oh. Um. Huh. I didn't really thought about that. We can, I don't know, we can do
Okay.
whatever.
Okay. Um, I feel like I can track some of the reasons why I have autogynephilia, but I can't be sure that it's not predisposition. But um, I feel like there is expressed in like feminine sexuality. There are certain things that are not like socially expressed for men. Like women can much easily be like sex objects or objectified, and it's like really
Right,
hard for men to achieve that. So I feel like that in itself will push a lot of people down the path of, well, if I can't get this as a man, I need to be a woman to get it.
right. Um, yeah, in my personal experience, I have achieved in the past like a male physique that a lot of men envied, you know? Um, and I I mean, while I think the desire to have a good physique and look good probably is tied to my autosexuality, I don't think that, I mean, just anecdotally of N of one here, that at least the objectification thing in terms of gender didn't really. I don't know that that's part of my personal narrative, but I totally get what you're saying. That like, there's socially, there's women are objectified more, and like it can even be harder to feel attractive as a man because no one's going around saying like, "Hey there, you're looking handsome today," or
Yeah.
whatever they say to
Um,
men.
Even as an act, I find that like like the cliche like pillow princess. There's no real equivalent for
Yeah.
being a pillow princess for a man. So there's like if you're a man and you want that, it's like, well, how am I gonna get that? I feel like that's for me. But I digress. I don't want to just keep talking about myself. Um,
Yeah. It's,
so how common are auto heterosexual preferences?
um, in males, in terms of it being a sexual preference in the sense that it is their preferred sexual outlet to other types of sexual stimuli, I think that it's around 1 to 2%. I lean towards around 2%. Um, and in females, I think it's around 1%. Um, so I think it's like roughly twice as common in males.
Okay. Um, okay. So why is auto heterosexual research being suppressed or knowledge being suppressed?
So it started in the suppression, the overt suppression started in 2013 when a group of transsexuals attacked Michael Bailey for publishing his book, The Man Who Would Be Queen, and they tried to get him fired, and they really just tried to do a whole bunch of reputational damage. Um, Luckily, he had tenure and he made it through. Um, but basically, ever since then, there's been a chilling effect where academics know not to touch that subject. They know that it is the third rail trans politics, and you do not touch it. You do not acknowledge it, and it's like, as for like where the emotional impulse comes to suppress it, like why transsexuals chose to do this, is, I mean, it kind of makes sense if the theory is true. Then they would be, and like gender transition with auto heterosexuality is kind of an expression of love. Then it makes sense that they would they would want to just live as the other sex and be seen as the other sex to the greatest extent possible, and they'd be very emotionally attached to that self-image. And so this theory that says that the reason they have that feeling is because they're heterosexual with respect to their birth sex, it just it sort of short circuits that desired self-image. And they some transsexuals just really hate it. And um and as for like the signs of the cover up, um there's you can't go to an autogynephilia or an autoandrophilia Wikipedia page. They don't exist. Um, you know, that's I think that's pretty intense just on its own. And then it's also not even mentioned in the standards of care for transgender people. Um, if you try to search that document for autoandrophilia, autogynephilia, you'll get 0 hits. But there's a whole chapter devoted to eunuchs, but there is not a singular mention of the most common cause of transgenderism.
So it is the biggest cause. So it is bigger than other causes.
Yeah, as far as I can tell, because just in the like, I subscribe to the two-type model where um, basically there's sexual predispositions that cause transgenderism, and one is homosexuality, and the other is auto-heterosexuality. And I just haven't seen a third cause yet. I mean, some people propose that there's the rapid onset thing, or that autism could be a cause. That might be the case for like a few people here and there, but I just think the overwhelming bulk of transgender like identity formation and gender transition is caused by one of these two causes. And I'm open to there being more, but I think I'm perfectly comfortable like starting with the idea that there's two, and if we find out there's more, we can add that to the model. But like, I'm pretty sure there's these two at least.
Okay. Why did you write this book?
Because I mean, I found out at like, so I live in Portland, which it's known for being progressive and trans inclusive and everything. And I had found out at the age of 31, I've heard about this orientation, and it kind of blew my mind that I had a sexual orientation that I'd never heard of, and that it was the most common cause of transgenderism, and yet I'd never heard of it. Um, it just it kind of felt unfair, where it's like I see every day when I look at all the different subreddits I follow, there's a bunch of autogynephiles in that are asking, say, in trans subreddits or in other ones, like, hey, am I trans? Like, here's the feelings I'm having. Like, basically, what's going on with me? I can't figure it out. It's confusing. And no one is just telling them what's actually happening to them. No one's just telling them the truth. And so there's thousands upon thousands of isolated, confused autogynephiles and autoandrophiles out there that have no idea why they have the feelings that they're having. And I just think that's wrong, that there's something like this which plays such a massive role in someone's psychology, and it impacts so much about how they'll live their life, and yet knowledge of this is being kept from them.
I had a sort of different experience. I remember being very sure why was going on, and everybody would gaslight me and tell me I was wrong. No, 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 it's not. If you can't, it's not sexual. Nobody that's trans has a sexual interest in being the other sex. It's like if you say that, it's like you said, the third rail.
Right,
It's like
yeah.
it's almost like people think it's discrediting to their feelings.
Yeah. Right, and that's like their own internalized like sex negativity there, that they can't consider a sexual motive to be valid, you know. Um yeah, and I've heard of people that, you know, that I consider to have the orientation strong enough to where they're trans, regardless of their state of transition. And I've heard of people that are honest that, yeah, it's sexual for them, and they've gotten excluded from like social circles because people thought they were being harmful to trans people, and they were just being honest. And whereas the liars are being included here, and it just seems wrong.
Yeah, You should not be suppressing your emotions if you're doing something like transitioning. That seems really dangerous. You should be honest about what you're feeling and going through, or else, there's a reason. There's a reason therapy and being trans, like, there's a reason a lot of trans people go to a therapist to be sure and stuff. And if part of the path forward is to also suppress how you actually feel when you talk about it, then how is that really? That seems counterproductive.
Right. Like if they're making a bad decision, how are they going to know? You know, ahead of time if they're not being honest and if they don't know the truth about their condition. How like I just think I want the highest percentage of transitions to go positively as is possible. And I think to do that, people have to understand why they're doing it in the first place.
Okay, something you mentioned earlier that I thought was really interesting and is really opening my mind, that I read in your book. You mentioned their relationship to autogynephilia and love or empathy. Um, can you talk about that? Because that's really interesting.
Oh, like how it can yeah, like it can give us greater empathy for say like what women go through because we'll be contemplating like a woman's perspective in life and I feel that like a lot of times autogynephiles just have thought like I wonder what it would be like to be a girl or like I wonder what she's experiencing or there's just there's a concern for the inner world of women that I don't think is as present in conventionally heterosexual males.
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah, I just think like Havelock Ellis, he once called it erotic empathy, and I thought that was pretty clever of him.
It seems like, with if that's true, and autogynephiles have extra empathy for women, it's a shame that radical feminists sort of hate and resent autogynephiles, because they should be like a team.
Right, and like that extra empathy is why the autogynephiles even care about what those feminists think of in the first place. You know, like even caring about feminism is a sign that they're caring about the world of women. And yeah, it's I don't like how the radical feminists portray autogynephilia as this like depraved predatory thing when from the inside it feels like love. It's there's just a really big disconnect between the internal experience and how they portray it.
Having spoken to a lot of them, and having some friends with some, I think a big part of that is they just don't want males to claim that they're females, because they think that like contradicts feminism, and it, like, like taking away progress for women. But I
Right.
think if you're just honest
Yeah.
about what, like, it, like, oh look, I am a male, then you can actually have a productive conversation.
Right, but you have to first acknowledge that you're male before you can have that productive conversation. Because if you know when like when a radical feminist comes up across say an autogynephilic male that's saying like I'm a woman, I'm literally female. There's no way for those two parties to come to an agreement because they can't even agree on what a woman is, and so they just end up talking past each other. And yeah, that I yeah I just I think part of why those feminists are so defensive is because there is something to the idea that if they can't even define what their category of people is, then how are they going to defend it? You know, if they can't even say who's in the group, how are they going to defend the group?
I feel like I could piss you off, because I feel like I sort of my analysis is, I'm a gender abolitionist. So while I am an autogynephile, I think that we shouldn't need to transition in order to be happy. And I think that the fact that we need to transition is sort of socially imposed. Like we're creating a polarized world where, in order to fit in, you need to, like. There's nothing wrong with men wearing dresses. This is my perspective.
No, dresses are dope. Like,
Right. So like there's nothing wrong with wearing dresses, like I was saying, like being sexually objectified or any of that stuff. And the fact that we need to like cross lines or identities in order to achieve these things, that's for me, that's the place where my activism would be focused.
yeah, I don't think, yeah, nothing you said was close to offending me, by the way. The the gender abolition thing, it's a beautiful vision, and I think it would be good to generally move towards attributing less social significance to gender, so that people can just, yeah, be less constrained by gender as a construct. And but I also know that biologically it's very real that on average males and females think differently and act differently, and this is because of their different developmental pathways as well as the hormones.
Okay. What's wrong with the commonplace understanding of AGP?
But I mean, first of all, a lot of times people have never heard of it. So,
Okay.
you
Yeah.
know, if they have, it's a really shitty caricature of it where it's this transphobic theory made up to harm trans women, or on the other side, it's just this completely depraved fetish that predatory men have because they want to creep in women's bathrooms, you know? And there's also the idea that it's inherently narcissistic because it involves the self and love. Um, but I'm pretty sure it's not narcissism. Um, 'Cause there's I know plenty of AGPs, and I don't see absurdly high rates of narcissism among them. Um,
I was talking to
yeah,
my therapist about this type of I didn't say AGP or anything. I didn't say autogynephilia, but I was talking about vaguely alluding to an autogynephilic fantasy, and she was like asking me questions to figure out if I was dissociative. I feel like it's more dissociative than it is narcissistic.
right. It can be dissociative. Gender dysphoria can get to the point where it's dissociative because your mind is like looking to be a woman and to find a woman inside of you, and so when you see your body as male, it makes it hard to relate to it. Like you look in the mirror and you're like, I know that's technically me, but there's no like flash of recognition. There's like a separation between you and yourself. And I do think that it definitely can cause dissociation. I know Zinnia Jones has written quite a bit about that. I mean, she's not pro AGP theory, but she talks about trans people having dissociative symptoms as part of their gender dysphoria.
What is meta attraction?
That's like increased attraction to someone because of what their traits say about you. And with auto-heterosexuality, the most common expression of it that is or at least the one that is most visible, is meta-androphilia in autogynephiles or meta-gynephilia in autoandrophiles, and that's just it's like attraction to like say like I experience the phenomenon of meta-attraction, and it's like it's attraction to being a woman with a man. Meta-androphilia is. And then the meta-gynephilia for the autoandrophiles would be attraction to being a man with a woman. Where they'd want to be a woman to play like a manly, assertive sex role. Um, rather than it being more of a conventional direct attraction to physique itself.
Right. Can gender be separated from sex?
Um, I don't think there's not really a clear dividing line with most of the stuff that people fight over as for whether something's sex or something's gender. You know, um, like in terms of gametes, like sperm and egg, that's pretty solidly sex. You know, um, but I find it. So I think of gender as sexness. It's qualities associated with sex, but it's not sex itself, and it's basically the isness of sex. And so it's hard to separate the isness of something from the thing itself. You know, there's kind of a blurriness to it.
Mm-hmm. So, are trans women women?
If you used sex-based definitions for a woman, then no. And if you used gender-based definitions for women, then they can be.
Okay, that's fair. Depending on where
Right?
you are.
It comes down to the definitions that people use for these constructs.
Which ones do you want to use?
I mean, in my own thinking about like what is real in the world, I use the sex ones. Um, and I don't do that to out of any disregard for trans identities or anything. It's more of I want an accurate model of the world, and like I wish I was a woman, but I I mean at least with my skeletal situation, like there's no fucking way, and so yeah, I guess I just like being accurate, and so I tend to use the sex definitions in my personal life just because it's stable and it works the vast majority of the time. Very small percentage of humans are transgender.
Would you say there's a difference between wanting to be a woman and being a woman?
uh Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
Um,
like I mean, like if you wanted to be rich, does that make you rich?
wish it did.
Right, exactly. Like I I don't know about you, but I bet if you tried identifying as trans rich, it wouldn't help your bank account that much,
Mm-hmm.
you know?
Okay. Okay. So, do you think that? I guess this is already answered. Um, I was gonna ask, do you think trans people want to be the opposite gender or opposite sex, but they want to have the opposite sexness? I would assume you're gonna say because
I mean,
of
I think it's individual. It like if they I think that if they have if they're incredibly strongly pre predisposed
disposed.
to being auto-heterosexual, they're going to want to be the other sex to the greatest degree possible, and that often includes the ability to like become pregnant or to impregnate somebody. you know
Okay.
that it includes like the actual sex traits, um which unfortunately are not possible to make real or corporeal yet. Um yeah, it's highly individual about whether someone wants to be the other sex or the other gender. Um, because like a lot of AGPs, for instance, their idealized self-image is like includes having a penis.
Mm-hmm.
So they're not literally trying to be the other sex. They're attracted to being a trans woman.
Mm-hmm. I can. Something you just said is something that would be someone's nightmare that I can imagine, like a particular type of rad femme. Say, like the type that'll say that men developing the ability to give birth is like they're like removing women from the gene pool. I've heard this said. What would you say to that? I'm not that, but I mean that's this elephant in the room when I hear you say that.
Right. Yeah. No. I think there's something to like the females of our species. They have historically been the only ones that have that reproductive role, and they're absolutely essential for that purpose. And I could see them being scared of losing that because it doesn't make them essential anymore. You know, and even if you go through human history, when the different tribes of humans fought against each other, it would often be like a kill all the men and take the women sort of situation, to the victor. Like their reproductive capacity is seen as a resource, in terms of like male mating psychology. And yeah, and I think they know that is part of what makes them important is that without them our species ceases to exist.
Kind of sad though to reduce them down to their sexual functionality.
Right. I'm not saying like that's all a woman is,
Oh, I know.
but yeah, but it's just in terms of like the realness of like the animals that we are, it's it's a fact that, you know, the one that makes the big gametes is generally like gets to be the chooser of who mates with them and all that. Um yeah, they're just yeah, males are kind of um I don't know, more disposable reproductively than females are. And yeah, it's it has shaped our psychology so much. Just these sex differences.
Mm-hmm. Is autogynephilia um I've heard it described as a progressive disease that worsens over time. Would
Um,
you agree or disagree?
it depends on how strong their predisposition is, and also the choices they make. Um, I in my book, like I think a reader could come away thinking that it's progressive, and like if I were to write it again, I'd probably change that to make it seem less inevitable that like transition would happen. Part of that is just the literature that I draw upon is the transsexualism literature, so it's like kind of a selection bias there. And um, I would say that for someone who has it to the degree that it's their most powerful erotic stimulus, that in all likelihood they will get progressively more committed to that cross gender self over time.
What's the difference between a sexual orientation and a sexual interest?
Um, so I differentiate between sexual orientation and sexual interest based on so sexual orientation is I guess it'd be easier to say sexual interest first. A sexual interest is what it sounds like. It's a sexual romantic interest in a particular type of entity, embodiment, or like method of interaction. And a sexual orientation is an enduring sexual or romantic preference for a particular type of entity, embodiment, or method of interaction. And so the difference between those is basically the orientation is a sexual preference in that it's preferable to other classes of sexual stimuli, and that it's enduring and stable.
So, do you think it's possible that autogynephilia could be an interest?
I think it is in most males that, like, if you ask males about, the various questions sexologists ask to determine the presence of autogynephilia, a pretty decent chunk of them will say, yeah, that would be hot to have a woman's body, you know?
Mm.
But I don't think that necessarily means they're autogynephilic. Like, they can see the appeal, or, like, I think there's plenty of guys that have maybe cross dressed, like, a couple times, and they're like, oh, that was nice, but then it's nowhere near their favorite sexual thing, so it's just, they do other things instead and sort of forget that.
Do you think people being submissive or dominant is like an orientation? Because I like being submissive or dominant is tends to be, or like being a switch tends to be something that's more persistent and underlying for other things in a similar way that AGP would be.
Yeah, I don't know the answer to that question, but that's an interesting question. Whether someone's more of the assertive initiatory role or more of the like receptive role. It's yeah. I don't know the answer to that or have an answer.
Have you ever heard of the phenomenon sympathetic pregnancy stomach?
Now tell me more.
Okay, it is when your significant other, who you've mated with, she's pregnant, she gets a big stomach, and the male gets a big stomach while she does. And this is known as sympathetic pregnancy stomach, and it's supposedly psychosomatic or like psycho like reinforced behavior to lead to it. One way or another, it just happens in males that are very empathetic sometimes.
That's kind of
Do you
cute.
do you think that that and AGP sort of are related? Because when I was reading some of your points about AGP and AGP, if anybody's listening, means autogynephilia, AGP and empathy. I was like, AGP and empathy, sympathetic pregnancy stomach. Like you're highly like being highly empathetic of a woman, and you like that such that it actually comes out in your like physiology, even in a way.
Yeah, that'd be pretty cool. I say as an AGP.
I think that
um,
happened to my dad because he got
yeah.
fat when my mom got pregnant. Yeah.
Oh, it's true love. Yeah. Yeah, it'd be interesting to. It'd be cool if scientists were to administer, say, like the core autogynephilia scale, or maybe just like the general autogynephilia scale to some men that had this happen to see if they do report autogynephilia. That'd
Hmm.
be cool to know.
What is the relationship between autogynephilia and chastity cages?
So chastity cages are like a really effective way of symbolically emasculating yourself. Um, it locks up your dick, which is like has a lot of symbolic value in terms of feminization. Um, and I think there's probably an overlap here with masochism, where like AGPs that are masochistic are probably going to be a little more into cages.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, I've noticed that sissies seem to love them.
Yeah. I find I think cages are psychologically really interesting of what the kind of experience that is because it's not the same as the fantasy.
No, yeah, it's like the fantasy is not to be caged, right? It's
Yeah.
something else, but it still symbolically evokes the like cross gender like orientation, the directionality of crossing gender.
Hmm. Are there any correlations between auto-heterosexuality and mental illnesses, and if so, why?
Absolutely. Yes. Yeah. I forget, did I share with you the whole book? Because you're
Yes.
asking questions as
Yes.
if you've read the whole thing. Okay, cool.
I did not read it like intently. I went very
Yeah.
fast. So
Yeah, well, it's a thick one, so yeah. Yeah, there's a way higher incidence of most of the studies are not done on AGP specifically, but on trans people. But basically, transgender people have way higher rates of mental health disorders than people who are not transgender. And a lot of these, like the odds ratios, are pretty intense. Like the autism is something like 6 times as common among trans
this is a
people.
really stupid question, a naive
Yeah.
question, but is autism really a mental health disorder? Because I always just considered it a condition. Just like
Um.
I just don't know. Like
Yeah, I guess it. I mean, those are just two different ways of looking at. Like, it's definitely like a neurotype. Like, it's a way that a brain works, right? And I guess it's like a judgment call of like, do we call it disorder so that we can justify third party insurance to cover it, or do we just call it like a condition? Um, I feel like there's some benefits to being autistic, um, but there's also a lot of downsides in terms of the social effects of just there's a lot of like I can tell that I'm missing mental modules that other people have, and it can make it harder to make friends, make connections, and to like stay included in groups and stuff if you're not picking up on like all the subtle signs that people send.
how about like depression, anxiety, with autogynephilia? Do these
Yeah,
questions that I'm asking, do these also pertain equally to autoandrophilia, by the way? Or is there, what are the distinct differences?
we don't know yet because when scientists ask these questions, they're often asking them, they're categorizing people as transgender, right?
Mhm.
And if you're lucky, they separate the male to females from the female to males. But like not even all the studies do that. They just lump them together as transgender. And so you have, with the two type model and the two sexes, there's basically four distinct groups of transgender people, you know, not counting trenders. And um, so it's hard to say because all these different groups are being mixed together and being called one thing. And so they're not being measured separately. But so I don't, I would have to say that it does seem like there is the higher incidence of mental health issues even among like female to male transsexuals. So I do think that autoandrophilia probably comes with, statistically a higher chance of having other mental differences.
Mhm. Would you, what do you think is more likely that it is a causation that mental health can lead to, or do you think that it's like a causative, or is it just a statistical likelihood? Do you think like being trans can make you have mental health disorders, or do you think that someone who is trans is more likely to just naturally have other mental health disorders?
But I think it's the second one for the most part. Like, I mean, I think people can sometimes transition when it's not the right decision for them and then find that they're suffering more. But I think the mental health disorder thing is just like it co-arises with the autosexuality. And it's yeah, I'm pretty sure they co-arise, and that it's not like that autosexuality causes the other mental health things, or that those mental health things cause the autosexuality, but that basically there's something in development that went off track. Because basically, evolutionarily, if someone is not conventionally heterosexual in terms of their main sexual interest is um, hooking up with someone of the other sex that's an adult. Like if that's not someone's sexuality, then something went off track in development, at least according to evolutionary logic. And you know, um, people that are homosexual, bisexual, and auto-heterosexual all have increased rates of mental health issues. So I just think something in the development went off track, so to speak. You know, according to evolutionary logic, I'm not making like a moral
Right.
judgment here. Um,
I have a
and
different
so,
worldview than that.
yeah, what's
I
yours?
I believe that it's very I believe very controversially that sexuality is not set in stone. I think that that doesn't mean that you can conversion therapy someone that's gay or something. I feel like once you're gay, it's going to be hard to not be gay, you know. But like um, things just chaos creates the and there, I believe in proclivities, but I don't think proclivities are a definitive. Very, I think that social influence, especially with sexuality, is so strong.
Right, yeah, there's some wiggle room here with like yeah, like for instance, if someone has a very kinky or paraphilic sexuality, so to speak, they're gonna have a whole bunch of different things that they can be sexually into, and so and they can switch things out and substitute in things and have a lot of variety and be able to like adapt to whatever their social milieu is willing to accommodate.
You're
And then there's
describing
also
you're describing
describing you.
when how I describe myself to my girlfriend. Yeah,
You're like, babe, I'm into everything.
I say I'll say something like if you wanted if it would be convenient for me to be into like licking the floorboards, like I could figure that out. Give me a week.
Right. And it's like, okay, let's channel my masochism here.
Yeah, well,
Got it.
it's like metasexuality, like you said. Um, I feel like that talks that describes the layers of abstraction that I sort of um, conceptualize. Like once you, if you break it down into its core elements of what you're interested in, you can direct those at any object or any like point, and or at least I can.
I think I see what you're saying. So, like, you're saying you can break down a sexual interest into its like constitutive parts, and then find those various parts in something else, and then develop an
Yes, and then be
appreciation
like,
for the
oh,
other thing.
and I look for it
Yeah.
actively. So, oh, but the floorboards, I could develop a foot fetish, and then after developing a foot fetish, be like, but people walk on the floor, and then by looking at the floor, I'm imagining the foot, and by imagining the foot, I'm imagining like the leg, and so it's like the
Yeah.
whole like chain of separation.
Yeah, I think with people that are highly paraphilic, they do have there's like there's a lot of fancy mental tricks you can do to make your sexuality work.
Yeah. Are there any benefits to autogynephilia?
I mean, I suspect there has to be because it exists, you know. So, like, according to evolutionary logic, if it was bad for reproduction, I mean, at least it wouldn't be around. Um, so yeah, I think it depends. It's very individualistic about whether a person finds that it's good for their life and acceptable to their self-image, and that they enjoy being autogynephilic, versus someone that hates it and wants to purge it from their system. You know, it really comes down to each individual, but I I do see a pretty like it does seem like the people that hate it the most are the ones that are trying to be conventionally masculine men, and they just have that really intense inner tug of war between their male and female sides, and
Shame,
they just who
shame. Would you
yeah,
say?
yeah, shame is so big among AGPs. I've I've gotten used to it, but like it's pretty impressive to see how often, say on like sissy subreddits or even on Ask AGP or something like that, how often you'll see a thread posted and then the account's already deleted like 5 hours later. Like someone posted it and then they just felt too vulnerable and like deleted their whole account.
That makes perfect sense. Yes, absolutely. That
Yeah,
makes yeah.
it's so common. And I yeah, so the whole like shame and then purge cycle, classic AGP. Um, yeah, I'd like there to be less shame because it's just such a corrosive emotion,
Hmm.
and while it may have some utility in terms of like helping protect people from reputational damage,
Just shouldn't
I
it shouldn't
don't.
have that weight.
No, it has way too much weight in people's psyche, and it makes it hard for them to feel okay with themselves. Like not even to feel good, but like just to feel that they're okay, like that it's fine to be who they are.
That sort of ties into my next sort of line of questioning. But do you think that people with autogynephilia are less likely to find partners or less likely to be satisfied sexually?
I would say if they have it, like say if there's someone that has it super strong to where it's pretty much their entire sexuality, then I think unless they can transition and become a super mega babe, I think they're going to be pretty dissatisfied with their sexuality, um, or at least with interpersonal connections. And yeah, it can make it harder to form relationships and have them last.
That
Um,
doesn't seem necessary. That seems just because society has certain expectations of men, and like women expect certain things of men, and it'll be harder to find a woman that wants something that falls outside of those expectations.
well, I think all sexual minorities have to deal with the fact that their sexual proclivity is less common, and so they have a reduced dating pool compared to heterosexuals.
Yeah.
Um, except not counting bisexuals here, because obviously they got the best of everything. But yeah, just when someone is strongly autogynephilic or autoandrophilic, it will reduce their dating pool, and they'll it can be harder for them to find mates that are sexually compatible. It's definitely a thing.
Are are women? I believe this, but I want to hear what you think, as my opinion means less than yours in here. Are women autogynephilic?
Not as the norm.
No.
No, I think there's gonna be a subset of them that that are, because if some of them are autoandrophilic, then I think logically some of them could be autogynephilic too. Because there'll be some lesbians that also have the autosexuality inversion thing, and I've seen a couple reputable narratives where I thought this person's telling the truth and they don't have any reason to lie about it. And so I do think it can happen, but that it's definitely not the norm. Like
Okay.
I've definitely seen trans women say that autogynephilia is typical female sexuality, and it just is
Yeah.
not. It's
Okay.
not.
Okay. My theory there is not psychological. It's like a social analysis. It just seems obvious the way we market things to women for them to always be like objectified and obsessing about how they look, to like then experience sex as like seeing their own objectification.
Well, right, like they'll put extra weight on feeling attractive. Like that will matter more to them,
Okay,
right?
but that's different.
Um, but that's not necessarily the same thing as having an autosexual proclivity. Like I yeah, and it's hard to actually. This is a really tough thing to measure, to figure out how to separate these different phenomena. So it hasn't been conclusively answered yet. Um, my gut feeling is that like what I experience is definitely not what a typical woman experiences.
I could reinforce that theory for you. Um, so a good example. This is something my girlfriend told me. Um, it's really hard to find a vibrator as a woman that like doesn't look like a big clit. Like there's none that look like big veiny dicks. They all look like sleek pill shaped like clit things, and it's hard to find one that looks like masculine.
And so you're saying like that's a sign that they're into having that they're
Either
like
into having or
actually.
they're having it like levied onto them.
Yeah, yeah. I'm not sure how to do an analysis on that one.
Okay, that's fair
I
enough.
do think vibrators are good though.
Okay.
I take.
Um, what are different embodiments of auto-heterosexuality? Um,
Right,
and
like the
what do
embodiment
you?
subtypes, right?
Yeah, and is I think you said in your book auto heterosexual auto heterosexual delusion. And do you think delusion is necessary to embody AGP for some reason?
Delusion. Yeah, I don't think I called it a delusion anywhere in there, but you know, if
I
you're,
must have seen it somewhere if I wrote that word. I don't know why I got that, but it came from something.
huh? Yeah, I think that right. There's something about like if you're fantasizing about being something else, you know, just the fact that you're doing that, there's a disconnect between like reality and like what you're fantasizing.
Yeah, I hope I didn't inject that. Okay, and it's not in your book because that
Yeah. No,
feels
I
rude.
don't think I don't use the word delusion for it.
I'm freaking out now. Like, why did I
You
write that?
you don't have to freak out. Yeah, I mean, I'm I'm the one that wrote the book. I'll be getting all the hate. Um, yeah, it's at least like in terms of the subtypes. Um, you know, there's sexes tend to differ in their bodies and those and the bodily functions of those bodies and how they dress and how they behave and their social standing, and they also tend to think differently, right? Right, and so basically, for any of these sort of attributes of being that can differ between the sexes, someone that's auto-heterosexual will want to have the traits of that they associate with the other sex. They will want those traits for themselves, and through embodying through dress behavior, body modifications, or pronouns and such, they can symbolically embody the other gender, and this is innately rewarding, and so they do more of it.
Are there? Do you believe that there are some embodiments that are healthier expressions than others?
Do you mean healthy in terms of like avoiding gender dysphoria or something else?
Um, that's a perfectly valid read of what that's a way you could answer it, but I also meant like, um, like, do you think it's possible you could embody autogynephilia in a way where you don't need to transition?
Yeah, I think that's the norm.
Okay.
I I don't think most of our kind transition.
Okay, then in that case, that leads to something I had like at the end here, but how do you feel about egg culture?
Yeah, I don't like that whole egg idea. Like this is basically egg is it's this it adopts the transsexual perspective as the norm, as an inevitable endpoint. And it's basically egg it's not describing homosexuals, it's basically just talking about auto-heterosexuals. Um
Can you just explain what it is briefly?
oh right, yeah. So like yeah, your listeners can go to Egg IRL, the subreddit, and see. Basically, an egg is like a term for a trans person that hasn't hatched yet. It's just the idea that, like, if you think someone is an egg, you think that they're secretly trans and that they like just haven't figured it out yet, or they're gonna transition eventually. It's like it's gaydar, but for the auto-het kind of trans. And yeah, the just that term and the way that subreddit operates, it like coaxes people into thinking that transition is the only option and inevitable, and it just glosses over the fact that until transsexualism was invented, a little under a century ago when hormones were first isolated and manufactured, um, until then there was only transvestites. There was only people that were, through dress or behavior, um, embodying the other gender, but the medical stuff wasn't there. And so I think that the norm throughout, I mean, clearly the norm throughout history has been to not transition. And I bet most of those people did not commit suicide because of gender feelings.
Mm.
So I think it's very possible to be autogynephilic and go not do transsexualism.
Something you said
Yeah.
earlier, I thought necessitates, though, in a quasi egg-like way, transition. Because if it's the case that you're less likely to find partners unless you transition and then you pass, then that puts a high pressure to transition. But I think that there's an alternative.
Yeah.
Okay.
Like, yeah,
um,
go on.
okay. I I th- I think that as hard as transition can be, and especially to transition and pass, and how much work and suffering that would be, another place you could put your effort in, is to find women that will love you or be interested in you for you without transitioning, and I think they do exist.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, it's just
I've
just
dated them.
one way is they're both two hard roads. You just change your body or change the way you find people.
Yeah, I found that like being a full-time transvestite is a great way to filter out incompatible sexual partners.
Hmm.
That, like, there's not any women like that would like see how I'm dressed and then like probably think like, oh man, I totally want that guy to like rail me hard. That's not like I don't imagine that that'd be a thing. I mean, maybe it
I
is,
feel like it
but
is. I feel like it
yeah,
is.
maybe it is.
Um,
Yeah.
I feel like women generally have repressed androphilia. Like
What do you
they
mean by repressed androphilia?
okay, so and this is not a very solid theory because it kind of goes in the face of evo psych theories. But I just feel like women are like the reason that women are so less attracted to men the way men are attracted to women, where like men will just see a woman like, oh, that's hot, and for women it generally takes more like status or social familiarity or something to get attraction. It's much more common.
Right, it's more
Um,
relational, less visual.
right. I feel like it's just like repressed. Like I feel like they can. It's just if a woman was to express just her true lust for like a man's body, that would like disempower her like as the objectified sexual class.
Yeah, I mean, I think it would be cool if women had that
Yeah.
unbridled lust. That'd be very convenient for me as a very male-looking male. Um, I think yeah, no, I think the Evo Psych thing sort of makes it
Wishful
seem
thinking.
not plausible. Yeah, no,
Yeah.
that would be cool as hell if that was the case. Yeah,
Do you think that autoandrophiles and autogynephiles are very compatible?
that's something I want to figure out, and like I think that's part of why I want this orientation to be more widely known, so that they can find each other. Because right now they lack the language to do that. Like they might, if they're part of some gender queer scene or whatever, that they can like sort of find each other that way. But I think it'll really help to have like to understand the orientation, know how to develop the radar to spot the people, and to like know exactly what you're looking for. Um, I definitely do see that. Um, it does seem like they kind of organically find each other at a rate that doesn't seem to be random chance. Like it seems like there's some a sort of mating happening here where they're finding each other, and even if they can't quite articulate why they like being with each other, they just do. Like it could be like say if you have like an autoandrophile and autogynephile dating, they like the autoandrophile might be like glad that they don't have to like be the woman role, and like maybe the autogynephile like cleans the house and does all the dishes or whatever, and whereas like maybe the autoandrophile is like the money maker or something, or or just loves grilling with the bros or something, something like that. Like
Maybe she's a sexually aggressive woman and she wants
right,
to,
yeah,
yeah.
she wants to like aggressively like dominate, right? And a regular straight male would not be down for that. They'd feel emasculated. Whereas like an AGP would be like, fuck yes, this is the best thing ever.
Yeah.
You know. So
Okay.
yeah, no, I think it'd be cool if they started finding each other and dating more.
You said earlier that about 2% of males have autogynephilic proclivities, but only 1% of females. But how does that match with the exponential growth in female to male transitioning happening right now? It's like,
Right. Yeah. Right. It's so confusing. It's like what's happening here, and I've tried to figure it out. And so yeah, basically the sexual orientations that cause transgenderism, same sex attraction, or like preferential homosexuality and preferential autoheterosexuality. Both of these are roughly twice as common in males. So like if it was just the sexual orientations themselves with no other factors, I would expect there to be a 2-to-1 ratio with male to female dominant, you know? But the the sex ratio has inverted since social media came around, and now females are dominant. And I I mean, it makes me think there might be something to the rapid onset thing. I've sort of been like not really buying into that too much just because the evidence is very new and tentative still, but also I guess it's just hard for me to imagine someone mistaking their gender feelings that bad that they like actually like go on testosterone when they are not autoandrophilic or homosexual. It just it's hard for me to imagine. But um one thing I've thought about that might like partially account for why the females are transitioning more is like gender transition seems to be motivated by love and by sentiments to a large degree. Like it's not simply about getting off. It's that you see living as the other gender to have great meaning and significance, and that it has a great pull on your sentiments, and you have a great longing to be that thing. And I think it's the romantic side that causes transition. And females do tend to, as far as I can tell, I haven't read studies measuring this, but is females do seem to be more sentimental, romantic compared to males with their sexual expression. And so it wouldn't surprise me if the average autoandrophile had way worse gender dysphoria than the average autogynephile.
Mm.
You know, like I could definitely see, like I think that autoandrophilic gender dysphoria might be particularly bad.
Do you think that just because someone doesn't have a proclivity doesn't mean that they are unable to have auto heterosexuality? Maybe
So
it's
you're
more
saying like if
maybe it's probably like maybe it would manifest more temporarily.
do you mean like could they like artificially induce it or do the things
Well, like
and
it's a
enjoy it?
it's if it's a proclivity to like an orientation, but as an orientation, it also probably is not excluded from being an interest. So maybe people are developing an interest for different reasons, but that would make a distinction that would enable you to have the same analysis about the proclivity, and have that remain intact. While there's now another reason why people are opting in and they're genuinely experiencing it, but it doesn't mean they have the proclivity. It means that there's another factor making people
Right, like social factors or some
right.
other sort of thing.
I think that the social factor, in my opinion, is my. I mean, I'm just an idiot. I think women hate being women, and young women are horrified by being women.
Yeah, it's so hard for me to imagine that just because I'm like, damn, being a woman would be so great. You know, I mean, I know logically that the females do have to go through a bunch of bullshit in terms of dealing with like mistreatment for being their sex and all that. But yeah, it does seem that there's a lot of females that just don't want to be women. And in terms of like their gender identity, they'll be non-binary because it's like at least that's not a woman, you
Yeah,
know. And yeah, I the non-binary demographics skew heavily female. Like 4 out of 5 of them are female. So
it's hard to even be non-binary if you're a male, and like in the same way. Like, I remember I, when I was in college, my autogynephilia, the woman that I wanted to be was the non-binary woman. Um,
yeah,
but like I couldn't just achieve that by just being a non-binary man. It's just not the same. Like it's almost
no.
no,
You
yeah.
talking about the aesthetic that you wanted, like maybe like short
This
colored hair, sort of queer look.
sure that, but also the way people treated them. Like like I went to an art school, so there were some very talented people at like they're aesthetically talented people, and so there was a lot of these non-binary women, and they would be treated like goddesses. Like everybody thought they were really cool, and like they're the top of the social ladder.
Yeah, it's funny. It's I think this is a byproduct of the intersectional turn that happened in the last 10 years and the progressive stack, where someone that has one of the cherished identities in this milieu will get higher status, and so there's definitely like someone identifying as non-binary takes them from being this boring, oh, you're just a boring cis person, to being like, oh, you're gender creative and special. And so it's, I mean, there's definitely within those sort of milieus you mentioned, like art schools, that
Mm-hmm.
that's gonna that sort of dynamic seems like it would definitely happen there. Maybe not in the broader world, though.
Yeah, I had to realize that. It took me quite a while to figure that
Yeah,
out.
and I could see it being easy to like idolize those women in terms of their like they're breaking gender rules
But there's
and
another thing to it that you're not seeing. That okay, so like in their non-binariness, they also would tend to heavily embrace um female secondary sex characteristics and just femininity as it is femaleness. Um and at the same time they would also say, but I'm desexualized, but like, so it's like they're to be like tempting you but also saying, but you're wrong. It's like a gaslight. It was like visual gaslighting.
right. It's the whole like have cake and eat it too vibe. Like, yeah, I don't I don't know what's up with I don't know that psychology is so alien to me. It's sort of like AFAB NB sort of thing. It's yeah, I don't know, maybe I'd be able to understand it better maybe if I was female.
Why is there less interest in understanding autoandrophilia?
So historically, sexologists have not paid a lot of attention to female sexuality in comparison. Like first of all, like because and male sexuality was studied more because men were the important sex, and also because when men misbehave sexually, it has tends to happen more often and have really big repercussions. And so there's a bunch of effort put into understanding, transvestism, but not as much for females. And part of that is probably libido too, that they're not on testosterone, and that female sexual orientation tends to be a little more fluid. So, if they are a little autoandrophilic, they could probably put that to the side. And also, um, yeah, the social milieu, it like I could see in decades past, like if a woman had sexual desires, that it was probably even harder to find partners that would care about, her attaining those sexual desires, where like the male pleasure is centered in a lot of ways. Yeah, there's a and another thing is that they don't have dicks, so it's like it's with male cross dressing. When you first do it and you get hard, it's like you can't ignore that. It's just like it's super fucking obvious. Whereas, say, like if a female were to dress as a man, those clothes also probably wouldn't be as saucy because they're men's clothes, and also they're not like putting on the men's clothes and then being like, "Oh, this huge throbbing dick is ruining the vibe." So
Hmm.
yeah, there's just a whole bunch of like little reasons why I think it hasn't been studied as much. It's like harder to measure. Happens less often. Women don't get into trouble with their sexuality as much. Better behaved in some respects. But I'm pretty like I'm confident enough that it exists that I structured the book to incorporate it,
I'm
and even
confident it
the
exists. I'm very confident.
right, yeah, and that's something interesting is like among the self-aware AGP community, there's like a lot of people having different opinions about it. But that's something I've noticed is that, except for like some of the big institutional sexologists like Blanchard and Bailey, basically everyone else is like, yeah, female autoandrophilia obviously exists, and because like I've talked to autoandrophiles in person and online, I follow their subreddits. I observe how they think, and it's clear that this sexual predisposition exists in females. Yeah, have you dated an autoandrophile before?
Oh yeah. And
Nice.
also another thing that makes it happens to me a lot. I've hooked up with a lot of, especially early transitioning trans men, especially because like, so if you just put like the gender like non selecting in your Tinder app, you're gonna see a lot of them, in particular because if they're just starting testosterone, they're really horny, and the chance that really like lubricates your like the amount that you're gonna hook. Like I hooked up with so many like trans men that just started testosterone.
Oh,
Now
so they
date.
had like the female appearance, but the male sex drive?
Yes, yes,
That sounds dope.
yeah. Also like kind of like I feel selfish saying it's dope, but it was. But like
Hey, as long as they enjoyed themselves, right?
sure. I unlike you, I you you I watched a couple interviews like in splices. You said you're very pro um like some you're pro people like making whatever.
Morphological freedom?
Yes, morphological freedom. I'm not pro
Yeah.
morphological freedom. I feel like it's
No?
once you're like 30 or something, like yeah, but like just young people, no, no, no.
Right, so you're pro it, but like you maybe have a higher age threshold to where it's like, okay, you're old enough to make that decision.
But also it depends on why you're doing it, because for me, I think that if you I have a lot of opinions about human psychology that go in the face of other people's like studied stuff, and I fight evo psych at every. I'm getting there. I'm starting to agree with certain things, but I fight it every time.
Have you really dived into it
I'm
yet?
starting to. I'm starting to.
It's
My
it's a
girlfriend is
worthy,
a she's a
yeah.
psychologist, and she does that with me. We have these fights, but
Yeah, you have to. It's prerequisite for understanding sexual psychology, I think.
what was I saying?
You were saying you have theories that fly against people's common perspectives.
Yes. About what?
I don't know. That was the best I could remember.
Um, I just. What were we talking about before that? What were we talking about?
We were
Auto
talking about
andro.
autoandrophiles.
Oh yeah, why I'm not pro changing your body and stuff.
Right, yeah.
Um, I think that if the reason you want to transition is because you experience dysphoria, I don't think that dysphoria is something that you're like that you could have a proclivity to, because I think that dysphoria can only come from other people's perception of you. So
Well,
like
that's
if
social dysphoria, though.
um yeah, but like even if you want to change like your body, I feel like it's because like I feel like the want to change your body, like I don't think anybody's born to want to change their body. I think you're born with proclivities of how you want to express your sexuality and how you like want to be treated. But I think the want to change your body is because those needs aren't being met, and so you develop this strong pathology of wanting to like you hate your body. And I think it's just unfair to people that we our solution rather than fix society, which in my worldview is the cause. We're just like saying, oh, just change your body. Like you shouldn't change yourself if there's a social problem. You know, you should fight the social problem. That's
I feel like sort of like a yes and approach to this, that like we can fight it on both fronts of like improving society, um and also allowing people to have the ability to change their body if they think it's in their best interest. Um, and I mean that's a lot of why I wrote the book, is because people are, I mean, a crass, memorable way that I often put it is like people are cutting off their dicks and they don't know why, and it's like I'm. It's like if they understand why they want these things, and then they still want them, then that's one thing. But like if they're just, they think, if they just absorb the mainstream transgender ideas and then think, oh, I'm having gender dysphoria, and the only solution to gender dysphoria um, is gender transition, then I think it's like, yeah, it sort of puts them down a path that they don't need to go down. Like I think I'm similar to you in the sense that, like, am I getting the read on you right that you think medicalization might be a bit overdone?
Oh yes, absolutely. Like that's a big reason why we have to define things in these stupidest, most incorrect ways. And like you have to say that like I have a like woman's brain. Like that it's so hard to even like the science behind that is so flimsy. And
Oh, I mean, but you can tell that some people are more mentally feminine than others, can't you?
sure, yes, absolutely. The same way you can tell like a violinist has like a part of their brain that's like related to the sense of touch, and that part of a violinist's brain is like really big. And so I think if you like live as a woman, or you have proclivities to want to express your sexuality, or be treated in the way that women are by default treated and allowed to express socially, then you're going to seek out behaviors and lifestyles that will make you have a more feminine brain. But I don't think that you were like born to have it. That's the thing. Like I don't think we can prove, like I don't think there's any evidence that you're born to have like that kind of brain. And having that kind of brain doesn't mean like just because you weren't born to have it, just shouldn't discredit the fact that you're like that. It just, we have to say that you were born to have it. We have to essentialize things because of the medicalization.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I do think it's clear that there are sometimes people that are born, like, say with the example of homosexual transgenderism in males. Like, some of them are markedly feminine from a very, very young age, like 3 or 4 years old, and it's not anything to do with how society's narratives are set up or anything. There's just something clearly different about their brain.
Well, that that may be it true. I don't see what's wrong with being a extremely feminine like man. Like
No,
man is
I
a,
don't think there's anything wrong with it. Yeah.
so I just don't think I think that you can be born to be like that and have those types of proclivities, but I don't believe that you can be born to hate your body or hate yourself. I feel like the
Yeah.
dysphoria is comes from the world we live in.
It comes from life experiences, and
Yeah.
like I think it develops over time. Like
Yeah.
that, yeah, where it's, like at first, a person may think like, oh, it'd be nice to be a girl, and then eventually it becomes regret that they were not born female, and it's like you used the word pathology earlier, and it's like, yeah, I do think it's, these orientations create, they sort of create a sort of like gravity to your thinking where it sets you down certain thought trains, certain ways of thinking, and if you just keep thinking that way, those ways of thinking will strengthen and then grow, and you can grow to hate your body even if you were fine with it at first.
Do you buy into the argument about people that are like they like hate their hand and they want to get their hand removed? I don't think you can be born to hate your hand like that. It doesn't make sense to me.
Oh yeah, I wrote a transableism chapter. Yeah, yeah.
Do you
Um,
buy into it?
I think that's, so. Like, I wouldn't say like, I would say they're probably born with the predisposition towards being attracted to being disabled in some way, and then Because I mean, at least with one of the transabled studies I read, that first one done by Michael First in 2005, that really put this condition on the map. Um, most of the people in that study, the parts where they wanted to get amputated were the exact same parts that of the first amputee they ever saw. Like, they wanted to get amputated in the same exact spot.
Right. That was my. While you were talking, I'm just imagining this, and the way I can imagine it is someone who has like submissive or like wanting to be like dominated proclivities, and the way that manifests pathologically through their experiences is they see that like some people have like a doctor kink. They want to be like doctored, but it could be
Yeah.
that you want to be an amputee because that's like an extreme submissive doctored for like state.
Right. Well, like the doctor example would be, I would think of that as like a method of interaction, like about like a relation between people.
Mm-hmm.
And the being an amputee, I would think of as like just about your embodiment, about your state of self, about what you want to be. And um, it, yeah, and basically all the body integrity dysphoria studies I've read, the ones that ask about sexuality find that virtually all of them are sexually attracted to amputees, you know? And with the erotic target identity inversion theory, we can assume that their desire to be an amputee themselves is the inverted version of that attraction.
So you think they were born with that attraction?
Uh, so like I think they're born predisposed towards having the autosexuality, you know,
Mm-hmm.
and then in terms of this, like that location dimension of attraction, self versus others, and then there's also this separate dimension of disability, or yeah, basically I've been trying to figure out like what's like evolutionarily like how to make sense of the disability one, because it's I can make sense of all the other ones like race, gender, species, those all make sense, but it's interesting. I wonder if it's just like something in our brain wiring where it's like we're primed to like want to see people as, generally we want healthy partners. We like signs of health are attractive. And so I sort of wonder if like maybe this attraction to disability or amputees is like, you know, sort of a paraphilic version of like attraction to health signifiers. That's totally my speculation because I'm just trying to figure out like how to make it's such a weird attraction. Like I get gender and race and all that, but like not wanting to have legs.
Well, I mean, it also reminds me of like chastity, where it is like a power exchange in a way, or a power removal.
Right, yeah. I mean, yeah, I could see there's something masochistic about severing part of your body for sure. Um, the types of feelings I've seen them report in studies though is basically after getting amputated, they describe this like the same things. It's basically instead of gender euphoria, it's body integrity euphoria, and they feel stoked as hell that they got amputated, and it makes them feel really happy and sometimes horny, you know. And yeah, so I do think the predisposition towards these, I do think there can be a predisposition towards being attracted to amputees and being attracted to being one. And
Specifically, or do you think it could be a more vague predisposition that manifests or like is embodied in that particular
right,
fixation?
I mean, I could see it being a more like a vague thing. Like I was saying, if there's like a dimension of attraction that's about health, I could see that being like maybe there's just a miswiring in their like attraction to health signifiers, and then life experiences are such that it'll latch onto whatever the first thing they experience in childhood is that matches up with that well enough, and then they'll lock onto that. Um, just because, like, that fact that so many of them wanted to get amputated at the same spot that they first saw amputees having, like, that really seems to me like childhood imprinting is playing a role here.
When the pandemic first hit, a close friend of mine gave me a hypothesis that is seemingly sort of playing out, that there's going to be a wave of people who are sexually interested in people wearing masks. Like they're gonna seek out like pornography with like people wearing like the face masks. And I think
Oh,
that
has
is
that
like,
played?
I think it's playing out. Yeah.
We'll really find out in 10 years once, like, the kids that were in during their imprinting window years, like, exposed to this, like, after puberty and they become sexually mature. Oh, God, that. That's gonna be funny. Like, people having a surgical mask kink.
Yeah. All right. I've gone through. I think I've gone through all of my questions. Does the experience of auto-heterosexuality depend on the context of the culture it is within?
Yeah, like, it'll be shaped. The particular things that someone wants to embody are going to be shaped by their life experiences, which will be shaped by the culture they find themselves in. You know, like an autogynephile that's like 60 years old is going to be doing different things to embody femininity than one that is like 15, for instance. You know, like the younger ones are going to be like,
Mm-hmm.
"Oh, let me get them catgirl ears," and then the older ones are going to be like, "Let me get this classy grandma style dress or whatever." You know, they're going to go with whatever lines up with like their conception of what women's or men's fashion is. You know.
Yeah, I've never heard anybody that's just so obviously true, and I've never heard
Yeah,
someone say that.
yeah. It's and this shows up with the ABDLs too. Like the really old ones, they get turned on by wearing rubber pants because that used to be the thing that they'd give to bedwetters um, a long time ago. But basically, like with ABDLs, the type of diaper they want to wear, the style of it very much correlates with what was the diaper that kids wore when they were kids.
That makes sense. That makes perfect sense.
Yeah, and like even some of the clothes that I bought sometimes, it's like, oh, that's what I would have bought if I was like, you know, like when I was a teenager shopping at Hot Topic, if I would have bought stuff from the girls' side instead of the boys' side, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
All right, I've got like one more question that's much more vague, but in general, regarding like evo psychs type stuff, where you're theorizing that things are the way they are because of evolutionary logic, like you said. Um, how can you be confident? How do you know? Like, I feel like you could justify a lot of things like that if you can find a trait, and then you can search for a reason why it would have been evolutionarily like beneficial. So how do you know that? I mean, a lot of it makes a lot of sense, but how do you know you're not going down a rabbit hole?
Like with the just so story sort of thing that like Evo Psych often gets accused of being. Like, how do you know
Um,
you're not just making up a story that doesn't correspond to reality?
yeah,
Um,
this might be a general question that Evo Psych gets a lot, but it's something I just have on my mind.
yeah. It's I think it can account for, say, like a lot of the big general stuff, like sort of like what the average person is like. But the theories often fall apart when you get down to an individual level. Like there's just so much variation between individuals that, you know, it like if you're dating someone, it may not necessarily make sense to apply evo psych to like understanding that individual, compared to just talking to them.
Me and my partner do it.
Yeah, it's um yeah, I don't know. I think there's definitely something to it. I mean, at least with some of the various obvious stuff, like why are males so DTF compared to females, And that makes complete sense with the different amount of investment they have to put into their offspring. Um, why is it males that disproportionately rape? And again, it's like the difference in cost of reproducing.
Those
And
are obvious.
right, like there's some things from Evo Psych that are like that make a lot of sense. And then there's other more niche things like, oh, do these fat deposits signify the ability to like reproduce better, and that's why we're attracted to gynoid fat deposits. Like, I don't know, you know?
Hmm. Fight it. I fight it. I want people to always argue Evo Psych to me, and I want to fight them. That's
I
the
mean,
only way I'll have a healthy idea of where the world is.
I just feel like whenever people make up have the societal and cultural explanations as like their first go-to, they're kind of skipping the step of the fact that this society is made up of a particular species of animal, and they're skipping the step of like what species of animal are you? Because yeah, like people have these like just so theories about why society is the way it is, and I think like it's important to combine the knowledge of what the human animal is with also human history and our knowledge of culture, like that basically culture is overlaid on top of the biology, and both are true.
Okay, yeah, okay, but as far as behavior, okay, I was recently at a zoo and they had orangutans, which is messed up. But something I learned about orangutans is like I knew in the wild the mother takes care of the child, and the males don't. They just go off and do their own thing. But in captivity, the males uniformly co-parent, which is very unique in apes. But just being in captivity, the change of context changes their behavior entirely.
Where you're
So
saying in nature the males don't parent?
they don't, no. But in captivity, I was watching a baby orangutan, like the males like get these big face lobes, and it was like swinging off of his face lobes. And he's putting up with it. He's being like a good sport. He's taking care of the child. And that just manifests because they're in captivity.
Right.
So
Yeah.
if that's the amount of leeway that an orangutan can have just from context and sociality, then I just assume we have so much leeway from our baseline, from because all like we build like massive social contexts to like control for like rape and control for like we're constantly trying to like improve upon our baseline.
Yeah. I think a lot can be done with culture, and I definitely don't I don't discount the a massive influence it can have. Like for instance, like right now we're doing a very like domesticated thing. We're indoors, we're wearing clothing, and we're using technology. Like this is very domesticated behavior compared to just hunter gatherer stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And something to do with Evo Psych to consider is also that like human males are actually atypically good parents compared to other ape species. That we put in a lot more effort into our offspring than other ape species do. So, our species has a pretty good amount of like gender egalitarianism to it, like to start with, and then like when we throw the societal structure on top of that, and all the social engineering that's happened in the last few decades from feminism and such. Um, it's yeah, there's definitely a lot of real progress happening in terms of having the different sexes interact with each other in favorable, fair ways.
You just reminded me of a question that I had written down. Because I heard in an interview you said something about feminism playing a role in your autogynephilia. Could you
Oh, like
talk about that?
yeah, like um, I think it contributed to gender dysphoria when I first started experiencing it. Um, because the narrative put forward by a lot of feminists and radical feminists and such is that like males are a problematic sex and females are just basically better. They're more civilized and kinder. They're just
Mm-hmm.
better. And so I think that kind of made it easier for me to appraise the female sex as superior, and thus not being that would be more painful, you know?
But the same women that hate trans women, like the rad femme extremists, are also the same ones that want to feminize men. So like,
Yeah, no, I know that they just want to feminize that men to the extent that it benefits them.
yeah.
Like, um, right? Yeah, they want males to be these things that they're not, because it
But
out of fairness.
males should be something they're not in some ways.
Right. And I mean, you could also argue that females should be some things that they're not
True, 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 true.
too. Um,
Maybe we let females be more natural than we let males.
yeah, I think there's more constraints on male behavior in terms of our range of expression that's allowed, particularly with respect to gender. Um, yeah, it's. I wonder if it's almost like a thing like that. Historically, it didn't matter what the females were up to, whereas like
Mm-hmm.
it mattered what men were up to, so that there had to be strong social rules about what men could and couldn't do.
Yeah,
Um, yeah, but also there's obviously a bunch of rules about what women couldn't do too.
I feel like a lot, well, for sure, yeah. But I feel like a lot of those are often not as much social rules as that just like explicit power like rules. Like you cannot do this. Where with men it's like a social rule all the time. And so we get as we
Yeah,
get rid of like the actual like women are not allowed to drive shit, like there's there's not social rules. They're just like actual oppressive rules.
yeah, that like you talking about like the Saudi Arabian rule that like women can't drive. That
Yeah.
is nuts. It's like yeah, no, that's clearly dumb oppression because I'm pretty sure that like car insurance costs more for males, so clearly females are driving better. You know,
Yeah. They're also better workers
right?
than
Yeah, like
males.
more conscientious and rule following and getting along with people and
Yeah.
yeah, no, there's definitely some real societal issues happening around that where like 60% of incoming undergrads to colleges now are female. Like they're better at following rules and incorporating into these larger social structures, and I think they're more well adapted to like what our current technological society demands of people. And
If that is
so
a
yeah,
true statement, then that necessitates, or I don't know, but I don't know the perfect word. That makes it that incentivizes men to desire femaleness or try to emulate femaleness.
it would, yeah, and it would be more about the men making sure to like develop their social skills and their ability to get along and things like that. Did you look? Oh, I'm curious, Lab. Did you look at any of the other types of trans chapters in my book, like the like trans species and trans race and things like that?
No, that doesn't ring a bell, so I guess I didn't. But do
Yeah.
you want to enlighten me? I did my best. I've been really busy, but I did my best to read.
Oh no, I mean you clearly did. Like I hadn't remembered if I'd sent you the whole thing.
You did.
Whereas
You did.
yeah, and you watch some other interviews, like yeah, no, I appreciate the effort you put in. Um, yeah, basically, there's this broader autosexual theory of trans identity where for any type of attraction to, there's a corresponding attraction to being a thing, and for each type of attraction to being a thing, there's a type of trans identity associated with it. And this is where this accounts for most cases of transgenderism. It accounts for transableism, transageism.
Rachel Dolezal.
I'm pretty sure she's the what in my book I call the autophilophilic type, which is attraction to being a particular race. There wasn't a neutral term for race-based attraction, so I had to make one, and I just call it philophilia, and philo is like race or tribe, and yeah, there's all these other types of trans identity along these different sexual dimensions, with species and age and disability, race, and often there's a big overlap between all of these different types of trans and transgender people. Like in all these different types of trans communities I've come across, there's atypically high rates of transgender identity in them, which points to a common cause, I think.
Okay, so like a common proclivity, would you say?
Right, yeah, like with specifically the sexual dimension of location about like autosexuality.
Yeah.
Because
It's bl-
like
it's
most
bl- sorry.
no, you should go on.
No, no, you should go.
Okay. um yeah, I was gonna say that like in Otherkin, for instance, like dragons and cool ass identities like that. I always bring up dragons. Most of them will say in surveys that they would love to be sexually or romantically treated as the thing they identify as, and like a third of them are transgender as well. You know, so yeah, like the rarest gender identity among otherkin is probably just like regular cisgender. They're at least not binary a lot of the
Wow.
time.
Um, it's just what I was gonna say earlier because I was gonna derail your thought, but it just blows my mind honestly. Um, with eh, whatever level of sexology research we have, that auto heterosexuality, is this your term by the way? Did you name that?
Popularizing it, I like a colleague of mine had used it in like a 2019 blog post, but like I did come to it partially on my own in the sense that like I was just thinking like what I need a term for autoandrophilia. Like I needed a term that included both AGP and AAP under the same heading, and I like it took an embarrassingly long time to figure it out. Like maybe a year and a half since I first learned about the concept of AGP. Like for a long time, I was trying to figure out there needs to be a new name for this that doesn't have as shitty of a mouth feel. And Yeah, no, I'm not the first person to use that word when I googled like other people have used it, but I'm definitely the one trying to popularize it.
Well, I'm just so shocked that it hasn't been popularized. Like,
It's
how
so
could we?
obvious, right?
Yeah, how could we understand like human sexuality without like that? Like even like no matter what, there's going to be some small amount of you that imagines yourself as part of sex.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's like there's all these other, like scientists have come up with terms for these other types of autosexual attractions. Like there's the autogynephilia, there's autozoophilia, autopedophilia. There's all these. They have names for these other types, but they hadn't somehow done this with heterosexuality, the most common sexual orientation. It seems like a weird thing where people had the autogynephilia label and then just stuck to it instead of thinking like maybe there's a better, more generic term for attraction. Like instead of it just being something that happens to males, like once we acknowledge that female autoandrophilia exists, we kind of need a term for just attraction to being the other sex.
Okay. Good important question. So, do you think that if your embodiment of autogynephilia is to be socially treated as a woman, do you think that that's fair to people around you? Like, because in that way
But like, is
they're
that
now
bringing your
being
kink on?
yes.
Yeah. It's it's like a tough question. I think that generally when trans people ask people to use their pronouns, that they're not doing it for sexual motivation, like consciously sexual motivations.
Mm-hmm.
That it's like they have these strong feelings about wanting to be a particular gender or not wanting to be a particular gender, and so that's why they make those pronoun requests. But it's definitely like a sort of a gray area where it's like how much are people obligated to participate in your self-image. And i I think that generally that it's a sign that our culture is pretty morally advanced that we are willing to accommodate like non-conventional pronouns because we recognize that suffering, like we're trying to reduce suffering here, and so we do the pronoun game to help address that. It's definitely a gray area though with like, I've even heard it argued that, cross-dressing in public is involving people in your kink. And
That makes sense, but also there should be no stigma about what clothes you wear.
exactly, like it's like I sort of see that side, but then also if you were to police that, you would be telling people they have to wear certain clothes based on their sex, which is
Yeah.
sexual discrimination.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think as long as people just like try to be kind of classy about it, and I think it'll help a little bit for it to be mainstream knowledge, so that like say like maybe people that cross dressers that go a little too hard at it will like maybe dial it back a little bit. Uh, yeah, I don't know. It's all very subjective about like what's too saucy though in terms of like like
Well,
sometimes I'll say like an outfit's like too cute for Costco. Like there's
oh yeah,
like
yeah, yeah, for sure. That makes me think of like the argument about drag shows, about them being too sexual, and I think that they are falling for something that you're not falling for. When a lot of drag performers will say that they are not sexual at all. They're
they're
like
obviously
you're
sexual.
just if whoever you're saying that to, like if you're saying that to a concerned parent, now you're just gaslighting them. Like that's not the way to
Yeah.
move the conversation forward. You know,
Right. It's about like which types of sexuality are acceptable and in which circumstances is like sort of my question I ask whenever all these ethical questions come up because there's so many different types of sexuality, and there's some that are ethical to act upon and some that aren't. Like say like pedophilia, you literally cannot molest a child and have that be okay. Whereas like with autopedophilia, you could dress as a child in the privacy of your own home, and though that idea might squick people out, it's hard to see a clear ethical harm with it, right? And so,
There's no harm.
right, yeah, and so it's like a yeah. I think it really comes down to society's going to have to hammer out like which types of sexual proclivities are allowed in which types of spaces and like what circumstances, and like how much. Like it's going to be a
Yeah.
negotiation.
I think the way I would frame it is not a negotiation of specific behaviors, but how much you are asking of the people around you. So
Right.
like,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah.
Like with the
Someone,
pronoun thing, you're clearly making an ask of people.
yeah. And if you like, the way I feel about pronouns and the way I think the most sane people that are conservative, the most sane conservatives in me think about pronouns is like, there's no reason to be rude or like mess with someone's head or like, like cause them distress. So you'd be polite, but if someone like is like really trying to force you to perceive them the way they want you to perceive them, that's too far.
Right. Yeah, yeah. Like for instance, like when if a trans woman were to think like you have to perceive me as a woman or else you're being transphobic, it's like no, you literally that's authoritarian. That impulse to control how other people think, that's authoritarian. And I think
Mm.
it crosses a line.
Um, Someone in my chat is saying, I don't think we need an umbrella term for attraction to seeing oneself as the opposite gender because you'd be trying to capture two concepts in one word. Like gay and straight, those terms are annoying. We already should switch to androphilia and gynephilia because they're pure descriptors. If you have a box you keep at home and only you know what is in it, androphilic man, androphilic woman, gynophilic man, gynophilic woman, so much more organized and useful than straight man, gay woman. What do you think?
That terms like androphilia and gynephilia are I do like how they're decoupled from the sex of the person experiencing the attraction. So that's what's cool about them, and that's why they were invented. They were invented because scientists were trying to describe transsexuals in a way that didn't offend their gender identity, but was also consistent pre and post transition. And the way to do that was to decouple the attraction from the person experiencing it. But I don't. Words like straight and gay, something about that is they're one syllable each. They're an everyday word that people can get. Um, obviously, auto-heterosexual is too wordy. Auto-het way easier to say, but it's still 3 syllables, 7 letters. Um, but I do think it's good to have both androphilia and gynephilia as well as heterosexuality and homosexuality because um, while gay men and straight women are both androphilic, those are very different experiences. One is having a homosexual experience is it's a different lifestyle and life course than someone that's heterosexual. Similarly, like if there's like a lesbian versus like a straight man, they're both gynophilic, but again, they're gonna have very different life experiences, and so I think it's good to have both of these names, like heterosexual and homosexual, which act as like sort of like umbrella labels for gender-based attraction that are with respect to what sex you are. And then it's also good to have these decoupled ones like androphilia and gynephilia that are decoupled.
Um, as an autogynephile, um, hearing you describe this and reading some of your book, I'm like clicking together a lot of concepts and experiences of my own, and I'm thinking about it in terms Like I want more words. Like I'm thinking about. I feel like there's an inherent creativity to the aspect of seeing yourself sexually rather than only focusing on the other, like focusing on your own self inwardly, like an inward sexuality. And your inward sexuality is a purely creative like experience. Like there's no like predetermined way to express desire to be a woman. It's based on what you see, and you create like you have a creative process where you develop what that actually looks like, right? Like,
Yeah, and it's very much down to your life experiences and your how your orientation is.
is there any connection with any of your research and creativity?
Um, I haven't looked into creativity, but I do know that AGPs can be quite creative with their fantasy life. I've
Yeah,
seen some really ornate fantasies written out. It's
that's
like,
that
yeah,
is what is clicking in my head. I feel like there's a connection there.
I'm personally not that creative.
Oh,
Um,
interesting.
yeah, because I'm pretty aphantasic, where like I don't even have mental imagery. Like when
Oh
people
wow.
say like they imagine things, I thought that was a metaphor. I didn't realize they were literally seeing things in their mind. Um, yeah, my brain, my cognition is it's more about concepts and thoughts and ideas. It's not imagery.
Interesting. One framework that I use, a stupid framework because I'm not a scientist or a researcher, to think about sexuality in myself and others with partners, is I think about myself as um, I think about like some people are primal, like they just want like physical, like raw physicality experience, and I'm very cerebral, where it's like I want to like write a whole fanfic about the scenario we're about to play out and then engage in it. You know what I mean? Like or like like yeah, basically a lot of detached cerebral creative experience. So I was trying to connect the dots between that creativity and autogynephilia, but that you're saying that you don't. So now I'm saying I don't think it is connected.
Well, I mean, we'll clearly need more than two data points to figure out. I
Yeah,
mean, there could be a correlation. Um, it's hard to know, though. That yeah, that'd be cool to research that. But I've definitely seen with people writing their fantasies online, there's a huge range of fantasies. Like autogynephilia, it can be as simple as someone just imagining that they have a woman's body, and then on the other hand, it can be like this really ornate, like sissy force femme fantasy where you like lose your luggage at the airport, and then
yeah,
like oh no, you have to wear your girl's clothes and your girlfriend's clothes, and then oh no, she found some guy off Grinder, and now they're locking you in a cage, and it's like, yeah, no,
yep, 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 yep.
there's like the whole range of creativity. Like,
Like
yeah,
you end up like you have to wear her clothes, and then you ended up like stealing something from someone, and then like as like a it's like a plea deal with him, you like arrange some agreement, and then you're like forced into a situation, like
uh huh,
yeah. um
yeah. No, you're clearly more creative with the fantasy than than I am.
yeah, that's but not a lot of people are. That's if I was to do what you, because you wanted to understand yourself, and that's why you wanted to study autogynephilia so much, because there's no words for what you're describing, right? That's what I got from your other interviews, if I'm
Right?
misrepresenting you.
Yeah, that like I had no way of understanding my experience, and then I found out there's this label that could explain so much stuff that stuff that I didn't even think was connected. But this made like a cohesive framework for understanding a whole bunch of stuff about myself.
For me, if I do that, it's going to be this thing I'm talking about, this creative. What is different about me that makes me have this a creative experience with my sexuality that most people don't have?
Maybe you're more paraphilic. I don't.
Yeah.
That could be it, or part of it at least.
What does that mean?
I mean, you went to art school, so like the sort of like selection bias here of like you're talking about someone that went to art school, like they're already kind of creative, right?
Sure.
Yeah, it might just be different attributes of your personality connecting here. Like you might be independently creative and independently autogynephilic, and then like the confluence of them is what you're experiencing.
Yeah. Yeah, like I only enjoy video games where you can be creative. So, yeah. Thank you for your psychoanalysis.
Yeah, no problem.
So, when you did research, like, so what did that look like?
Like, how did I learn
Yeah. So
what
I
made up
saw
the book?
a lot in your book was talking about history and stuff like that. So, like,
Yeah.
what was the process like?
So my learning process for finding out about this was um I mean it started with I had an argument with an ex-partner about sex and gender. She thought I was transphobic because I thought you couldn't change sex. And so after that relationship ended, I went to the library to look up books on trans stuff because I wanted to see like, am I wrong about this? Like, am I having bad opinions? And then I found Alice Traeger's book, which pointed me towards Bailey's book. And then once I found about the concept of autogynephilia, I just read everything on the internet I could find about it, which honestly didn't take that long. And then, um, at least from the like acknowledging that it's a real perspective. I wasn't reading the critiques of it at first because I mean I did read them, but it's like no, this is clearly real. I'm experiencing this. Like stop denying my reality, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I listened to all the interviews, and this is just the first like month or so. And then I found Anne Lawrence's book, and then I read that. And then after reading that, I was like, holy fuck, I'm definitely this thing. There's no doubt anymore. But then I asked trans women online about it, and they all pretended that I was wrong about this, and so I doubted myself again. And so I was like, I know, I'll read the old stuff because I saw in Anne Lawrence's book she cited Hirschfeld, which was published in 1910. And so I then read Hirschfeld's book because I wanted to know. I figured like if this thing is real, like as a sexual orientation, it'll happen across generations. And so if I read this old book, the trans people in it or whatever people are in it, they won't be concerned with how will this affect optics of the transgender movement. There's not even none of those concepts would even occur to them. And so I figured I could like look at these old things as a sort of like time capsule of the sort of feelings the orientation causes, the ones that just arise from within without necessarily being imposed by culture or cultural ideas. And so I read Hirschfeld and also Ellis's Eonism, and I was going through the narratives and marking them up with themes and tagging them with themes that I had seen in later stuff like Anne Lawrence's book and underlining the good parts. And I went through it a few times and then I started typing that up and just like the notes, like the good quotes and stuff. And then I went through the bibliography in Anne Lawrence's book and read most of it in there, I'd say, or at least most the like directly relevant stuff. And yeah, I basically used the bibliography in Anne Lawrence's book as the foundational structure of which studies to start reading. And then, once each study, like they point to others. And then another important thing that happened is that I found the self-aware AGP community online. And um, and I found like there's a few other people that have read a lot of the literature. And so I was able to talk with them and sort of refine my ideas. And, like discard things that felt wrong and keep things that felt accurate, And then, yeah, through talking with people online and basically just continually reading studies, I after a year of this, I got to the point where it's like, okay, I just literally spent a whole year full time, not making any money, just reading this stuff. And it's like, what am I going to do with this? Like, there's clearly important knowledge here, but how am I going to share this with my kind? And originally I thought, oh, I'll do a website. But then I started working on that, and then I was like, no, they could take me out before I, like, have any influence. And I thought, like, okay, a book. You can't destroy a book. And so, like, in my mind, I'm always conscious of, like, there's always a risk of getting assassinated with coming forward with this sort of thing, right? Because there's so much hate about talking about it. So,
well, if you get assassinated, we'll all know why.
Right, and the Streisand effect will blow it up even more. So don't do it.
Okay.
People. But yeah, I was concerned. I was like thinking practically, like, how do I spread this knowledge to my kind? And because if I didn't turn that knowledge into something, it would have been kind of masturbatory, so to speak, to have spent a full, like, thousands of hours in 1 year just reading this stuff. I wanted to turn it into something that could help others like me. So, because very few people have the time or the inclination to read such papers. And so, yeah, basically, I just read a metric fuck ton of studies and talks to the other self-aware autogynephiles and kept networking with them, kept reading, and through the book writing process, I read even more, and yeah, now, like, right now, it's roughly, like, 4 years ago this month I was a couple weeks into reading about this. So I'm just, like, 4 years into knowing about this and being aware of it. So, yeah. That's basically my process. I read a lot and decided I wanted to turn it into to craft what I'd learned into a memeplex that was much more medically viable than what was currently out there, because like, the vocabulary that's currently used, like erotic target location error, autogynephilia, erotic target identity inversion, these things aren't nearly as catchy or relatable, and so it's just like, okay, auto-het, way simpler, and then autosexual orientation, simple way of talking about attraction and being something. And so I basically crafted the words I use to plug into the existing memeplexes that people have in their mind. Like, they already have ideas of sexual orientation and heterosexuality, and the auto part is the only thing that's different. So I just designed how I spoke about it such that it could fit into people's pre-existing cognitive structures.
Yeah, I'm glad you did. I think you did a good job at that.
Oh, thank you.
By any chance, are you familiar with Kay Brown?
Yeah.
I have her book. On the side.
Yeah, I bought it too. Did you read it?
I have not read it yet. I started reading it. And I noticed I want to read it because I want to talk to her. She said if I read it, and I said I would, like, take notes, then she would talk to me. But one thing I did notice from what I have read in it is she comes from the other side, not autogynephilic, but what is the other term?
The androphilic?
No.
HSTS? The
HSTS, yes. And there's sort of, in the beginning intro, she talks about how she felt different from the autogynephilic types, and there were, like, so many fewer HSTS, and she has, like, sort of can tell there's some sort of resentment there.
Yeah, I mean, I blocked her on Twitter because I find her personality abrasive, just, like, interpersonally. But
she is abrasive, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, her blog is good. Like, I read her blog was very important in my early learning. Like, my first month of learning, Like I read that whole thing. It was great. Um, yeah, I did get her book. I didn't. I found it like self-indulgent. Like it was like too much talking about herself and not very like. It just didn't seem like practical to me. What would an AGP get out of reading this was sort of like that's where I come from. It's like
Hmm.
how will this benefit an AGP or an AAP? Like how will they be able to understand themselves better after reading this?
Well, I feel
Um,
like that's what I'm getting at from the little bit I read. I feel like it's not for AGP. It's not about. It's kind of very different attitude. So I feel like talking to her after talking to you would be a very different um, perspective.
yeah, I imagine it'll be um, less informal of a vibe. She's pretty. Yeah, I don't. I mean, if you get her to talk to you, that's great. I haven't seen her on any podcasts or anything.
She said if I read her book, she'd talk to me about like a month ago, and I still haven't read it. But
Okay. Yeah. I mean, yeah. I think her website is good. Very like her website's very practical. With a bunch of short articles that can help basically AGPs and AAPs, sexuals more broadly, sort of understand transsexualism and the cross gender drive. Like her website is good.
all right, I have your a link to the website promoting your book in my description, but I'm going to like copy it and put it in my chat.
Oh yeah, I'll.
Your book is called Auto-Heterosexual, Attracted to Being the Other Sex. And when is that coming out?
Probably around mid-June. The exact release date isn't um confirmed yet, but I talked to the publisher a few days ago, and it's looking like we'll have it in mid-June. Um, yeah, and so where should I send you? Oh yeah. Did you add me on Discord?
Yes.
Did. Great. All right.
Okay, cool. I'll get your Substack and your PayPal in the description too.
Dope. Um, yeah, um, I think I think it's a decent book. I mean, I'm biased because I wrote it, but um, it's right now there isn't a book out there that just straight up says to people that are experience this cross gender attraction, like this is what it is. Here's how you could tell what it is. Here's the evidence for it. Here's how it's manifested across history. Here's how it impacts transgenderism. Here's how gender dysphoria works. Here's how the cross gender development process works. Like I'm just trying to explain the physics of gender, so to speak, so that people can go into transition knowing why they're doing it, or just so people can understand themselves better, and also so their loved ones can understand themselves better. I think it'll improve matchmaking if everyone understands the sexualities involved here, and also it can improve the relationship between, say, like the men that are attracted to trans women. I think it. I'm hoping that it'll help deal with some of the nasty like chaser discourse, so to speak. If the trans women realize that they share something in common with these people they call chasers, in that they both have paraphilic forms of heterosexuality, and they're just going to play different roles in that, and they should sort of see each other as um that there's something in common between them, and not that like one is good and the other is bad. And yeah, so there's a whole lot of stuff in that book. Um,
It's a good read and it's structured very well. The way it's structured is makes it very easy to read.
oh, yeah, I tried to that was actually my second attempt at writing it. My first time, I got like 6 or 7 months in, and then I ran out of money, and I found funding, and then the funder had passed it to an editor, and then she's like, "This is unworkable," and so I threw out the whole first thing. I thought at that point I was like, "Okay, I've written everything except for like the last chapter," and then I was like, "Oh, I gotta throw this out and start over," and so I did that, and I think that's part of why it's good is because I threw out the first draft. Um,
Someone in my
yeah,
chat just said,
it covers a lot.
I'm a trans male with both autoandrophilia and autogynephilia. My transgenderism doesn't come from either kink. What would you say to that?
Right, this is an FTM,
Yeah.
right? Yeah. Okay, so something there's this idea that female sexuality is more fluid with regards to gender-based attraction, right? And so if this autosexual theory is true that like basically it's just our regular sexuality is inverted onto ourselves, like it kind of makes sense that um like a female to male person could be either turned on by their feminine or male attributes. They won't be as rigid with the gender category of the stimuli, you know? And that's a pattern I've noticed among transmasc people that, like say like there's the FTM femininity subreddit. Um basically and like non-binary is much more common among them. There's there's just like a less rigid specific gender identity on average compared to what AGP trans femmes experience.
This person said, this person's probably angry. It said, it's not true that female sexuality is fluid and I do not have gender-based attraction.
Okay, I guess if they don't have gender-based attraction, then there's just age or species or race at that point. Um, yeah, I mean, look, it's okay to transition to live as a man for sexual reasons. I'm just gonna say that. Um, so it sounds like this person doesn't want to hear that there's sexual motivations behind their gender identity. I just want to say that if that is the case, it's okay.
I think they said it. What they said
Is there like
was,
a channel here that I can see?
yeah, here, if you look at, here, I'll send you a link to just my stream and you can look at the chat. Here. They said,
Okay. Wow, this is so meta. I'm watching us now. Okay. So like it's female sexuality is comparatively more fluid than male sexuality. Like it's like I don't think it's like a blanket statement that all females have a fluid sexuality, but it's comparatively more common among them. And some signs of this is that bisexuality is more common among females. Um, and yeah, and then like I said, with the autosexual implications of that, like I noticed that among trans masks, in comparison, there's more fluidity and range of expression um, than I see among AGPs.
so when you say fluidity, you mean just less rigidity?
Yeah, like less rigidity with the specific, like Blanchard would call it an erotic target, like the type of thing that you're attracted to, like basically being less rigid about what that thing is.
Okay, she just said it is not. That is based on physiological arousal ratings, which are not female sexuality.
Right, yeah, there's an issue with sexology where when they measure in the lab male arousal, It's a lot easier because it's easier to measure dick's blood flow than it is clitoral or vaginal blood flow. So there's like fe- females have been shown in the lab to basically have genital arousal response to basically any type of sexual stimuli. Like I'm pretty sure like they even respond more to bonobos than males do. So it's like they if there's sexual stimuli, like their genitals are getting prepared, so to speak. And there's an evopsych hypothesis for this called the preparatory hypothesis, which is basically that evolutionarily it's beneficial for females to have that sort of like arousal and vaginal lubrication in response to sexual stimuli because it protects in the case of coercive sex, aka
Yeah.
rape. It makes it so they're less likely to suffer injuries and subsequent infections and stuff like that if there's proper lubrication.
Earlier, they said, "I'm avoiding feelings of being raped. I'm not seeking pleasure feelings of sexual gratification."
Huh. Is this person an autoandrophile or something?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And autogynephile, they said.
Right, yeah. And I've definitely seen that I will say like in terms of my observing various Reddit communities, it seems more popular or more common among trans masks for them to maybe have a kink about being misgendered, so to speak. Although I've also seen it among sissies too, where they like being sometimes they'll like being like degraded as men or whatever.
Oh, this is
Uh,
very clarifying. This is very clarifying. I'm saying that unwanted physiological arousal is the sensation of being raped, and I believe that. Like me, many trans men are avoiding that feeling.
hmm.
That actually makes a lot of sense. So the physiological arousal,
Rather than they could
which,
associate that with it.
yeah,
That's an interesting idea. I mean, there's I know that trans women they often like the fact that estrogen makes it hard for them to get boners too. Like a lot of like trans women, the autogynephilic ones I'm talking about, like they hate that they get boners from feminization and they just want to feel like normal women. And yeah, it sounds like this individual has a very particular case. Yeah. Um.
yeah.
Yeah. I don't. Yeah, it's interesting. I don't know any. I haven't seen any data on like what amount of like trans masks find like unwanted arousal painful or anything like that. So I have no idea of knowing if this the person's experience is typical.
That is very interesting. I wonder if that is typical. If that is typical, I feel like there's just so much we don't know about female sexuality in general.
Yeah, no, I I agree. And like yeah, and even when they get measured in the lab, there's so much less concordance between what they say they're into and how their bodies respond compared to males.
Yeah,
And something interesting about that is that like lesbians show more concordance than do straight females. And so it seems to be like not just about having different genitals, but also there's a different psychological situation happening.
could the attraction to men be just different than attraction to women somehow in humans?
It could be, yeah, because like there's a like it's I think there's a whole bunch of psychological traits that come along with either of these attractions, you know, because like males and females, they have the different evolutionary reproductive roles, and they have the different sex-based attractions, and so basically, like when there's a homosexual man, on average they're gonna be slightly more feminine, and a homosexual woman's gonna be slightly more masculine on average, and it suggests to me that there is stuff that's directly tied to like being attracted to men or being attracted to women, like that they are kind of distinct attractions.
So this person said, but after all the research and work I've done, I think that the suffering has a purpose, and it's my body telling me do not have sex with this person. That is a compelling argument. I, as a male that has sex with women, I really resent how little we understand about female sexuality.
Yeah, I think it's more wiggly. I think it's harder for scientists to measure. Like, yeah, not even just the basic like blood flow measurement problems, but like I don't know, male sexuality just seems so much simpler to me. And like, of course, I'm male. Like, that makes sense in a way, but it literally does seem simpler in the sense that like a man can just look at a naked woman or a depiction of a naked woman and be aroused by that. Whereas like I feel like women in comparison need their like they'll be like, what's the emotional angle here? What kind of guy is he? Like how does he treat his friends? Like is he nice? Like there's all these interpersonal things that they seem to care
Yeah,
about more than males do.
I hate that. I hate it. Makes me want to go gay.
I mean, just go gay for women. Just go gay for women.
Yeah. Okay. And any other things you have to say or want to say? Um, I will make sure I have all of your links in my description. I put them in my chat a second ago. Your book is very well written, and I recommend everybody get it. I've already read it. I have a copy of it, but I'm still gonna probably buy it.
Yeah, it'll be really helpful if like in the opening week, if there's reviews and purchases specifically in the opening week, because there's just something to do with Amazon algorithm where that has massive long-term effects. So yeah, buying and reviewing if that's in the first week, that's the most helpful. Um, yeah, and as for like what I want to say is basically the most important thing is that it is okay to be attracted to being the other sex. It's not inherently harmful. It's an okay way to be. Um, and if you do have this sexuality, it doesn't mean there's anything wrong with you. Like, it's basically, I just want my people to have a sense of deep okayness with themselves. Like, that it's fine to be the way they are.
Cool. Nice talking to you.
Yeah. Thanks a lot, Smith.
You're welcome. Bye. All right. That is Philly Illy. Phil Illy. Tomorrow, I am going to have a conversation with our relevant nicotine, not so erudite's husband, and Elder Drazi, and we're going to be discussing male sexuality. Um, oh, once again, male sexuality. You're gonna have to wait on a discussion about female sexuality, guys. But we're gonna talk about male sexuality tomorrow at 8 p.m. and I'll see you there. I'm looking forward to it. It's gonna be probably a good conversation. All right. Hasta la vista, Smith heads.